we have the Moonies. Who are the Moonies? Moonies are people who believe that man did not land on the moon. And so one fellow says, space is fake. I like that. Space is fake. What do you mean it's fake? You can either you can define space, but say that space is fake. What does that possibly even mean? Okay. And he says the ISS is in a pool and a green screen. Augmented reality studio provides the comedy you see broadcast via NASA's ISS live channel. Okay, so he believes it's all green screened. Okay, and he says NASA is not a space agency. I like that. The issue is, again, I ask all these people to do one thing and one thing only, and they don't want to do that. They just want to argue because they're talking about the deep state, okay? They're concerned about politics. Everybody's an expert in politics. We all are expert in politics because that's belief. And so we all have our beliefs, our recommendations of how things should be run. I talked about Ayn Rand. All she had was recommendations on how the world should be run. That's all she did in her life. She didn't do anything beyond that. And so, yeah, you might sympathize with her opinions. That's fine, no problem. But to say that she had anything to do with science or physics or philosophy, that's where the error is. And the same here. You're saying, if you're talking about the deep state, the fact that the government has fooled you so many times, run so many false flags, and that you are going to throw the baby with the washwater, you won't believe in anything that comes out of the government, well, you're taking it to the other extreme. Okay? NASA, I have no reason to believe that they would have a 70, 80 year now running hoax, saying that they never sent a single rocket into space. They never have any rocket orbit the Earth. They never sent the rocket to the moon. They forget about humans. Here we have the ISS out there, and that's one thing that you can verify. You can verify with a pair of binoculars or a telescope. Why don't you do that? Why talk about politics and all the fake news and all that stuff, which has nothing to do with science? Just go get yourself a pair of binoculars, point them at the sky, where the schedule of NASA, which is published out there, tells you that the thing is going to be out there, and just point your binoculars to it. Now, if it doesn't pass near your where you live, ask a friend somewhere to look for it and see, if he can see it out there, if it passes over his head. But to say that it ain't out there at all, that's like, the cardinals that didn't want to look through Galileo's telescope at the Galilean moons. Okay, I refuse to look through your scope because I don't want my religion to fail right now. I'll just continue believing in the Bible, right? And that's more or less your posture. You're saying, I'm not going to believe that there's an ISS out there orbiting the Earth. I'm just going to go with my belief, which is that, and what other people tell me, authority, other great researchers out there who say, oh, the ISS is a hoax and what, space is fake. I'll go with those people. I like those people, right? Okay, so you don't believe that the ISS is out there when all it takes is just looking through Galileo's telescope. That's all you got to do. Okay, fellow says, the only observation that leads you to state that water makes globules in space is the one in the ISS. And he's referring to this lady, that astronaut who's in the ISS, and she lets go of a drop of water, or it just comes out of her toothbrush, right? And she swallows it. Okay, and you can see the drop of water has shape. Okay, even though it has no container other than air, you could say, right? But there is no container per se. And air, supposedly is not a container. I don't think you can say that. I mean, all the molecules of air would tend to go outwards, not, towards a central point. So there's no reason to think that air, any more than that water drop, are encapsulated in some kind of container. Okay? And so, I show this other clip there, the one you see on the upper left, the astronaut releasing a drop of water in space. So he's questioning this. He says, so whether do you discount that all rose from the water to the atoms in the ISS? I don't discount them. This guy's misunderstanding everything, okay? So he says, that seems to make no sense whatsoever. Yeah, because he didn't understand, okay? He thinks that that drop of water that you see there, including the one from the astronaut, that they're not connected to the astronaut. And that drop of water is not connected to the lady astronaut there or to any of the atoms that form the ISS. Yes, the drop of water is connected to everything in that room. Okay, it is connected. Okay, so what you don't understand is gravity. Okay, that's why you ask this question. You say it makes no sense to you whatsoever because you do not understand the rope model of gravity. Okay, and what we're saying, you have to understand Newton's equation to understand the strength of gravity, which is what you're questioning. Okay, that the drops of water, every atom in both of those drops of water are connected to everything in the universe. To every atom in the universe. Okay, they're all connected. What you don't understand is the inverse square law, Newton's gravitational equation, universal gravitational equation. So that's what you got to look at. If you don't have enough mass, okay, if there's not quantity of atoms nearby the drops, then it floats around. Okay, more or less, depending also on certain context, certain situation. And I think that's the next issue here. And these people say the following. This is another person who questions the ISS. He says, oh, I discovered something here that escaped the directors of the studio version of the ISS. Okay, we're talking about Hollywood here. Okay, they think there's no ISS out there. They don't think there's anybody on the ISS floating around. And so this is what someone, flat earther or electric universer, he discovered this. He knows this for a fact. And here it is. He says, the water in that glass should be floating. And he's showing that glass that's on the table there. Okay, and you can see that the water is not coming out of the glass, which is what he thinks should be happening. And so I counter that and I say, where in the world did you get the idea that the water in that glass should be floating? He thinks it should be floating like the drop that you just saw floating without a container. Okay, that's the issue. And I think there's something more, more evident, more obvious, and it's that this fellow didn't question why the 3 astronauts are not floating. I mean, they're standing on the floor of the ISS. Why aren't they floating? Forget about the water. Why aren't they floating around and jumping around? And so if he can't answer that question, forget about the water. Then I ask him also, making fun of him, saying they're not wearing helmets either. I mean, they're, how can they breathe up there, And then all that high vacuum that you have up there, the lungs should be exploding. And shouldn't they be zapped by the solar wind and other rocks and minerals that the sun throws at the earth? I mean, these people are so ignorant. That's what they are. They are ignorant people. They don't do any research on this before asking the question. They just go out there and whatever comes to their mind, they just say, oh, this looks obvious to me. And so what can you do if they don't understand basic physics? They should do a lot more physics and less politics. Politics is opinion. They don't understand that. They're worried about the deep state and what the Illuminati are doing to them. They're going to corral them and put them as slaves in the future. They're worried about all that stuff. A lot of them are narco-capitalists who believe that there's too much intervention by the state in your life. And so they do a lot of politics. They don't do any research on physics, and they bring all their politics nonsense into physics. That's what's happening. And so they say, oh, look at this. They're trying to fool us. They're worried about the fake news, about the false flags, and not about the physics of it. That's where the problem comes in. So they pass as ignorant people. That's all they do, is ignoramuses. Okay, along the same line, someone says, the film used for the photographs and for the films of the Apollo missions, referring especially to Apollo 11, worked in the ultra vacuum of 10 to the minus 12 torr. Remember, if they're on the moon, you're talking about 12 to 13, minus 12 to 13 torr level, meaning almost perfect vacuum, at least from the Earth's point of view. Not perfect, but it's getting there, right? Very few particles per cubic centimeter. And you look it up, and this is one of the answers you find out there. The film itself was normal photographic film, although a special emulsion made specifically for NASA. Not a space agency? It wasn't some super exotic photographic film printed on an unobtainium base. It was standard acetate film with a gelatin emulsion. And then another fellow asked, is it possible to use the camera in low pressure or vacuum? And someone answered there, the camera itself can work in vacuum. A few issues have to be addressed. Internal temperature sensors should be monitored. Some electronic components may be overheated because there is no convective cooling. Outgassing of glue and lubrication may occur. Depending on estimated operating time in vacuum, modification of the camera must be considered. Instead of modifying the camera, environment enclosure can be used. Okay, so there are answers to this fellow's question. And again, it's people looking for, like we say in Spanish, the hair on the egg to try to figure out how they can debunk the space program, meaning man landing on the moon. And I keep saying, first of all, no analysis of the films will get your argument through. Why? Because you will not be able to convince anyone on Earth, okay, even yourself, that the difference between the actual moon landing and the thing done in a studio. You cannot, because if you can reproduce man landing on the moon with the studios, you cannot tell the difference between any of those. So any errors that you find, then you're criticizing the director of the movie. You're saying that the Roman gladiator who has, a wristwatch, the director didn't notice it and let it go into the movie, that he made such a, gaping error. Do you think that NASA didn't hire the top guys to make the movie if that's what they did? And if they did, they're going to check everything. They're going to check the shadows, the stars in the background, and the jumping, and they're going to check everything. They're going to make sure everything is perfect. They're not going to let a single little detail go through that makes you doubt. And for people to say, oh, look at all these errors that they made, the stars in the background, the jumping, it's all wrong, and the lighting is wrong, the shadows. If they made so many errors, something is wrong with your understanding. Okay? You have a problem. You can't find so many errors and say they made all these errors. Okay? That's one issue. The other one issue is, if you can't tell the difference, if you cannot tell me what the difference is between a film made in a studio of the landing on the moon and the actual landing on the moon, you don't have a case. You don't have a case. You have to be able to distinguish between those. If you can, which I think you can, okay, then you don't have a case. And again, and what I ask people to do is go out there and look at the ISS, the International Space Station. If it's floating, if it's orbiting out there, you got to tell me how that monster, that football field-sized object, got up there. How did they get it up there? Weren't there certain steps that they had to take to get that thing up there? And if they had to take steps, then that means that NASA, space agencies around the world, they did send rockets out into space. Certainly they had to put satellites out there, except the flat earthers who don't believe even that. They had to put the satellites out there. How did they get the satellites out there? How did they get, the ISS up there? If you can't answer that, if you say, well, there weren't any prior steps, that they just one day, they had a headache and they say, why don't we send some rockets, the ISS up there in one shot? Is that what you're saying? And if the ISS is up there, obviously they had many steps. Among them, that they had to send rockets into space. Okay, in this case, they used the shuttles to take parts up there and build it in space. You can't just send this football field-sized object into space. So you got to explain it. You got to find out all the steps that they had to take. Even if you don't believe there are people inside the ISS, some people don't believe that part. But you got to explain the ISS. So if you want to deny the ISS because you don't want to get your binoculars, your telescope, well, all bets are off. We don't even have a starting point.